Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Safe Travels podcast. My name is Joey. Today, we are at Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, and I sat down with the Chief of Resources, Brinnen Carter. Brinnen and I chatted all about the natural and cultural resources here at the incredible Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Brinnen, it's an honor to sit down with you. We have one of the back walls here of Black Canyon of the Gunnison behind us. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
You are the Chief of Resources here at this park. What all does that entail in terms of the resources of this beautiful area?
Well, you know, the Park Service is set up really with two principal missions. One mission is to protect and preserve park resources. So that can range from archaeological sites all the way to things that you would traditionally study in zoology. So, you know, Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep or Gunnison sage grouse or elk, Rocky Mountain elk. The interesting thing about that is when you preserve those resources in good shape, you actually provide a better visitor experience because you provide what typically is not provided in other contexts. This is considered to be a protected area. You know, it has some of the highest protection of resources in the country. So being able to see all those natural resources and get interpretation of the cultural resources in a context like this is really very special, you know.
Does having visitation at a park like this, where most of the visitation's on the rim and not necessarily in the canyon, does that pose risk to how you maintain those resources appropriately?
You know, I would say normally that would be problematic, but we fortunately here, we don't have as large a visitation as you would need to start being seriously concerned about resource damage. Like what we see here, because we get about 400,000 visitors a year, and they mostly come to the South Rim. Very early in this park's development, in fact, in the 1930s, the local Lions Club set up a road building campaign, and they built the South Rim Drive, and they put in a lot of the overlooks that you see here, and those have been upgraded over the years. So, you know, we're getting close to the point where we're having major issues with congestion, but for most of the year and in off-peak times, the infrastructure we have to support that type of visitation is actually quite good, and we see less resource damage than you would expect for the number of people that come to the park. Now that may change if we get, you know, 800,000 visitors a year, which is something that you see in some of the other parks, like in Utah or, you know, like at the Grand Canyon. But right now, we're in a good spot in the sense that we can think ahead to higher visitation and make some changes to accommodate that. So.
You mentioned a lot of the overlooks on the South Rim Road. One thing that I really love about this park, we're going to dive more into it in a little bit, is when you go to those overlooks and you look down into the canyon, it looks hostile. And human history and artifacts here are typically found on the rim and not down in the canyon. And one thing that I love about this park is there's also not much access down to the bottom of the canyon as well. So it makes it really feel like you're almost back in time and this daunting canyon's not hospitable for us.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, the Black Canyon, you know, over the years has been really kind of unhospitable to exploration. Like when the first explorers came down, when Gunnison came over, they didn't even attempt to go through the central part of Black Canyon here because there are areas there where, you know, it might be 40 feet wide, and you're trying to put, like in season when the Gunnison was undammed, you know, in the spring you might have 40,000 cubic feet per second of water going through the narrows, which, I mean, there's no way you can do that. Like it's, you know, a kayaker won't do it. You know, you can't get through there by water, and you can't get through there by land. And it's like, it's not happening. and if you get a chance, be sure that you go out to one of the overlooks, right around, I'm not sure if they're still spilling water from Crystal Dam, but when they spill water and you get over 2,000 or 3,000 CFS through the central part of the canyon, you can be at one of the overlooks and just sort of tilt your ear down, and you get that roaring sound of the spring flooding that's coming up like 2,000 feet, 2,500 feet up from the river. And that's one of the principal resources that we were trying to save, is that sense that you could still feel the power of the Gunnison River in spring when the floods came.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, taking a couple steps back, I want to chat a little bit about your journey getting to this park. By trade, you are an archaeologist. So what got you into A, the outdoors, B, archaeology, and C, the National Park Service?
Well, so I came up, I sort of did a typical like bachelor's degree in liberal arts. Like I dual majored in history and anthropology at a little school in Maine called Bowdoin. And when I got done with that, I was kind of at sixes and sevens. I didn't know what to do, So, being a person from Florida, I was like, God, what am I going to do? Back then they didn't call it a gap year. They just call it being lazy, not getting a job. So I went home and I was like, I just don't know what I'm going to do. So I spent the summer lifeguarding on Daytona Beach, which is what I'd been doing the last couple of years of college. And I started thinking about like, what the hell am I going to do? And I just couldn't decide. So I applied as a post-baccalaureate student at University of Florida, just to get some graduate classes under my belt. And I applied. I thought, man, the last year in college, I had taken a diving class, and I liked scuba diving a lot. So I was like, what can I do that like combines like diving and archaeology and history? It's like, God. So I finally figured out, over a couple of months, man, I should become an underwater archaeologist. I mean, yeah, it's like, it makes sense, logically. Yeah. This is kind of what you're doing. So at the same time I was taking classes at University of Florida, as a post-baccalaureate student, I applied to Texas A&M University in College Station to their nautical archaeology program, because it focuses on underwater archaeology, but mostly the archaeology of ships. So I got in. I wasn't sure whether my grades from Bowdoin were going to be good enough, but they give you an interview, and for whatever reason they decided I could probably hack it. So I went to Texas A&M for 2 years as a master's degree and wrote a thesis. And about that same time, my dad died. So I was a little at sixes and sevens about what to do about that, after finishing all my master's coursework. So I went back to University of Florida because I knew I had some credits there in graduate school, and went on to the PhD. And that's kind of what got me into the archaeology part of it. I worked on a couple of underwater prehistoric sites, Paleo-Indian underwater sites in North Florida. And then as I was finishing up both the master's degree and then the dissertation, I got a temporary job with the Park Service, doing plantation archaeology in the Caribbean, of all things. I just packed up from Tallahassee, where I was living, and we went down to Water Island, which is a little island in the Charlotte Amalia Harbor on St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And we excavated a bunch of sites over the summer, and about midway through the summer I'd applied for a job at the Southeast Archaeological Center, and the boss, my first boss in the Park Service, called me up and was like, "Do you want that job?" I was like, at the time, you're a starving graduate student. You're working for GS5 wages, $12 an hour or $10 an hour and per diem. And I'm like, yeah, that GS9 sure sounds like a great plan, to keep food on the table and a house and stuff. So I was like, I got to take that, So that's kind of what started the archaeology and work in the Park Service. And then I worked there for 10 years and then moved on to a couple of other parks, Delaware Water Gap, Sitka in Alaska, and then Shenandoah, and then I came here.
That's an amazing journey. And it just goes to show, the incredible work that you've done so far to getting to this point as the chief of resources here at this park.
Yeah.
Certainly you've done amazing work in those parks that you had just mentioned. Do you still get your fix in diving?
It's a really interesting, I've dabbled in it ever since. Like, I did a little bit of dive team stuff at Delaware Water Gap. I did mostly terrestrial archaeology at Southeast Archaeological Center. I did some diving up in Alaska on a shipwreck called the Neva, which is was one of the Russian supply ships that brought both Russians and trade goods into Southeast Alaska in the early 1800s. But it hasn't really been central to my Park Service work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There is a chance, surprisingly, Blue Mesa Reservoir is just upstream in Kurikani, and the two parks, Black Canyon and Kurikani, are managed together. We have a submerged resource unit now in the Park Service, and they were thinking about coming out this summer and doing a side scan sonar of the entire reservoir. So, they would capture there are 2 submerged bridges down there. There are 3 town sites, and there are whole outcrops of the Morrison Formation. So they're big dinosaur. There's dinosaur remains all over in and above the reservoir over there. So I may get a chance to go out there and at least do some remote sensing work.
In your many years of archaeology, how has your maybe life mindset changed when you're excavating and learning about Paleo Indian sites and native tribes and early explorers that explored these amazing places in the U.S.?
Well, I think when you're a young archaeologist, you're really motivated by the discovery part of it. Like, I can still remember, in the plantation, one of the plantation houses back on Water Island, we were digging in this bread oven. Like, it was back in the old days, they used to use stone and brick ovens for baking bread on the plantation. And, we're sort of scraping out the ash, from the 1840s, because the plantation house was burned down in the slave revolt of 1848 in the Virgin Islands. So we're scraping the ash out, and I can still remember kind of like this sort of glint in the ash. We had found first of all, we found it wasn't a cast iron, it was a steel pan, like upside down in the ash. Like, somebody before the plantation burned down had taken this skillet and put it upside down in the oven. So we real carefully grabbed that thing and pulled it out. We're going through the ash. Pretty soon, here's this little glint of gold. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, what is that? So we just scraped it off, and here's this bracelet, gold bracelet, that someone had they must have pitched it in the oven or put it in the ash in the oven, thinking, oh my gosh, we might not survive this revolt. it's super violent. They're coming for us. So they put this jewelry in the ash in the oven. I was like, this is so cool. It's like a little bit of frozen behavior in time. And it's like you get super excited about stuff like that. But and that's still, no, don't get me wrong, that's still exciting. But the cool thing is actually learning things about group behavior, learning things about the way people act as a social being that's like the more interesting and compelling long-term part of archaeology. It really, if you don't pay attention to the lessons of archaeology, you can make very serious mistakes as a people, very serious mistakes, because there are a lot of lessons out there to learn.
I love that. What's one of those lessons that you've learned?
Well, one of the things that's really important to realize is that a lot of very complicated societies come apart. Like they somehow they can't cope with something. They can't cope with interpersonal relationships, so they start fighting with each other. They can't cope with changes in the environment, and when they can't do that, their basis of production, like their agricultural society, can't be supported because they have multiple crop failures, or they can't move crops from place to place, or they can't move themselves from place to place. So, I think there are two specific examples that are super interesting archaeologically. One is the coastal populations along Peru and northern Chile, where the Atacama Desert is. They had very advanced, very sophisticated societies, the Moche, the Chimu, and not so much the Inca, because they were more a mountain people, but the ones that lived in those west-facing river valleys in South America, they had very advanced agricultural societies, or societies based on agriculture. They built huge temples and had very large populations, but their societies were based on irrigation agriculture. They had to have the right amount of water coming down at the right time, and they had to get it through a canal systems out into their fields in order to survive. And at some point, a combination of not being able to cope with invading peoples from the highlands and changes in the actual environment, the amount of rainfall, and the way that the canal systems are built, cause the organization of their society itself, to kind of collapse as an entity. Now, the individuals may have survived. They may have moved to the highlands, or sort of reconstituted themselves on smaller groups, but the fluorescence that you see along that coastal area kind of dissipated and it cycled too. Like, you get one group and then that dissipates, and then another group comes in. And so the lesson for us is we live in an agriculturally dependent society. And in fact, the reclamation project here is it's not exactly the same, but it has, if you pay attention, the maintenance of that system is critically important to the local society here in the Uncompahgre Valley, because it's the basis of our farming economy. And it's important that we understand that may not always function the way that we intend it to right now. So it's a lot of work, to maintain that. One of the other points also is that there are cycles to humanity. We have advanced make advances, we do things, then something happens, and the society ceases to function the same way, and the dynamism of the societies and the people in it are really the key to transforming without necessarily the violence you see in a lot of archaeological societies, So
one of the amazing things about national parks is when you come to Black Canyon, you're likely going to dive into the geological processes that have built this beautiful place. But at every single NPS site, there is a human story. Sure. And part of the Park Service's mission is to tell those human stories and to explain those societies and interpret those societies that have existed well before us. So what is that story here at Black Canyon of the Gunnison?
Well, the canyon itself is fairly young geologically. It's the Gunnison River essentially cut the canyon in about 2 million years, which is, in geologic terms, is just like, it's a flash. It's no time at all, especially considering that the basement rock that comes up all the way to the rim, in fact, you can see it in the distance, that sort of flat line is a giant unconformity. And the top of that is about somewhere between 1.7 and 1.8 billion years old. And then you jump up and everything above it is like from 300 to 250 million years old. So there's a giant gap in there. Now, the cool thing, and when it comes to the human history of it, is that what it did is it set up a very interesting set of ecosystems here, where on the south side and up on the mesa that slopes towards Crawford, you really have kind of a sagebrush steppe. Like, it's open. It's the sagebrush. Let's see. I'm trying to think. There's little bits of sagebrush around here. I'm trying to see if you can see some. Oh, there's a big sagebrush right over there. Anyway, the big sagebrush steppe sets up a really good dynamic for herd animals. But as you come up onto the top of the rim, it transitions to a pinyon juniper forest with gamble oak. So you can see there's mostly oak around us and some mountain mahogany. That's mountain mahogany. That's all gamble oak. And that habitat is actually good in certain times of the year for herding animals as well. So what you see for the human history is that the folks that, like the Ute and the Proto-Ute and the Shoshone, the Paiute, the precursors to those people recognized the pinyon juniper as being a staple crop. So they would actually organize their yearly round around when the pinyon would open. So they'd come up to the rim of the canyon, to the pinyon juniper forest, and beat the pinyon pine cones off of the trees and render all the pine nuts for storage and carrying around to other parts of the geography around here. But they also hunted elk up here. The West elk herd, you can kind of see the very tip tops of the elk range behind Grizzly Ridge, which is that feature right there at the top. So the West elk herd comes down from the West Elks in the winter, and they actually have a wintering ground on the western side of the mesa on the north rim. And with that herd, when that herd comes down, it's not like a few, it's like 1,000, 2,000 elk. Well, that's perfect for winter hunting. So in addition to harvesting pinyon pine nuts from the north rim, they also targeted that herd in the winter for harvest. So, and the same thing up here on the south rim. There are fewer archaeological sites on the south rim than there are on the north rim. But they came up here also to utilize pinyon, the pinyon forest. So
That's fascinating. Was there any interaction with the Gunnison River itself in fishing, or was the canyon not accessible to people before there's trails or anything else built?
oh, it was accessible, but it wasn't like there were a lot of resources down there. I mean, the cool thing about the canyon itself is a lot of the target species, the things that you would want to harvest or you'd want to use for spiritual purposes, especially the mammals and the birds and everything, they actually are transient in the canyon. So the Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep might go down to the river, once a day or once every couple of days to drink, but they're going to come back up to the rim and actually graze on grasses and browse, if you're mule deer, on the rim itself, so that you don't have to go down there to get that. And of course, there was no sport fishery, and there's not really any indication that the Ute or the Proto-Ute, any of the tribes in this particular area targeted fishing as a primary means of subsistence. So
I'm glad you brought up the spiritual side. How has this canyon been looked at from a spiritual side and a landmark to this area?
What I've heard is that it didn't figure really prominently in Ute or Proto-Ute belief systems. Other parts of the landscape that are further up the Gunnison River, up towards Gunnison itself, the sagebrush steppe and the mesa tops that you see as you head across the US 50 towards Gunnison. We do have some really interesting sites out there. Like there's a major quarry site in Kurikani that's literally a stone's throw from the Gunnison River. The archaeologist that was here for 20 years, Forrest Frost, he located capture blinds for eagles. And I'm not sure if you know what that is.
I don't.
Yeah. So what that is, you set up a pit on a mesa top. Essentially, it's not quite like Grizzly Ridge, but if you've seen a mesa, it kind of has a scree slope, and then it has very sort of dramatic sort of rock outcrops at the very top. Well, right on the top of those mesas is a really desirable place for a lot of raptors, from everything from golden eagles to bald eagles to peregrine falcons. A lot of different raptors like to use that habitat. So what and we're not absolutely sure that they were Ute that did this, but the prehistoric peoples dug and created these stone-lined pits that were big enough to hold a person. And then you create a blind by putting a wood structure or reed matting over the top of it. And then you put some sort of lure on top of that, a piece of meat or a small game animal, something like that. And the raptors find that irresistible, so they come swooping down and try and grab the bait off of the pit, and it allows you to reach up and grab the eagle or grab the peregrine right on the spot. It's really dramatic, obviously as a way to capture a bird, but it that figures prominently because all of those birds have high spiritual value, and when you do that, you can capture it helps you embody their spirit in you as a person, Plus it allows you to harvest the feathers and incorporate it into your ritual practice, which is really important.
One thing that I'm always amazed by in every area, by every indigenous tribe is the ingenuity and all the things that we can learn from those tribes, because they know this land better than any of us. And a lot of land managers like yourself can take some of those practices and utilize them to create a better and healthier landscape here at the park. Do you find that to be true here at Black Canyon?
Oh, well, I think this is kind of a more general lesson. Like, one of the things that's really clear is that putting fire on the landscape in a controlled way was standard practice for a lot of American Indian tribes. Like, that was the way you did it. You picked the right time, you picked the right conditions, like right now with light wind, like there's a kind of a light breeze, not a lot of potential for a fire to get out of control. Like, this might be a perfect time to do a prescribed fire. Humidity might be a little bit low, but if you are thinking of how to improve your landscape for you, because they were thinking, what do we want to do to make things better for us personally? Like, it might be to reduce the tick population or to improve habitat for deer or elk. They were willing to do that. And, we have a very different sort of Western perspective on things. We've done 100 years, 110 years of fire suppression in the West. And so the fuel loads in all the forests, a lot of the forests in the West, because there hasn't been prescribed fire or that type of habitat-based management with fire, it's sort of put us at a disadvantage. Like, we're at the spot where a lot of land managers realize that we need to reduce fuel loads. We need to be more active in our landscape management, but maybe in the mode of American Indian tribes, actually use that indigenous knowledge of landscape management to improve the quality of the habitat and restore kind of a more natural balance to the landscape. That would make many of the habitats look and function much more like they did when the first Europeans sort of came to the United States.
With so much visitation at these parks, including Black Canyon, people are, especially in Colorado, there's 4 national parks here. They're coming from different areas. They're coming from different national parks. When they come here, if they go on a hike, they're potentially vectoring different invasive species that aren't native to this landscape. Does fire management and prescribed fires also help with that and resetting the fire regime and the native plants here?
It can. I think the one thing, that's a little, it's hard in a park is that the visitors often will bring in invasives. Like, a classic example is this here, dandelion. Very common all over the place, but this is a very tough invasive plant. This particular plant might put out 500 or 1,000 seeds just from the flowers that it's putting up right now. So the question is, how can you manage the landscape without letting some of the most aggressive invasive plants take over? And you might not see that in this gamble oak, sort of mixed gamble oak forest, but on, let's say, the sagebrush steppe, the big problem right now is annual grasses like cheatgrass. Like, if you burn off an area of sagebrush steppe at this point, it may convert that entire ecosystem to an invasive annual grass ecosystem. So you have to be really, really careful about how you apply traditional management techniques so that you don't give the invasives that really have, they didn't they didn't develop in this ecosystem, so they don't have the predators in this ecosystem to sort of keep them under control. And if you let loose a major fire in an area, they've seen this up in Wyoming and Idaho, and we actually may be kind of dealing with that a little bit on the South Rim, where we had a couple of catastrophic fires in the mid teens. And what that does is like that catastrophic style fire gives those invasives the opportunity to sort of take over the ecosystem. So you really have to be careful about what you do, and judge your work in the long term, and not let the invasive plants get out of control, because they essentially will convert your entire ecosystem.
With you being the chief of resources, you have a staff of specialty employees who are focused in different areas of this park and maintaining it and preserving it. What are those roles that are underneath you inside your resource department?
Yeah, I kind of like to think of them as kind of like they're the people that I look to like tell me what to do, like, because they're the ones that their business is actually to specialize in a particular area and sort of guide me and then the superintendent and all the management team on the right thing to do. So we have an aquatic invasive species program, and that's run by a gentleman named Bill Brueggemann, who has worked for Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a law enforcement ranger. He's worked for the Park Service as the program manager for AIS. He's managed Colorado state parks. Like he has just a wealth of experience doing all sorts of both enforcement and resource management. And his job and his whole program is meant to keep invasive zebra mussels and quagga mussels and now golden mussels, along with a couple of other types of aquatic invasives, from getting into Blue Mesa Reservoir. And that you'd think that would be a simple task, just inspect the boats, and if a contaminated one comes up and they clean it out so that it doesn't have any active mussels in it. But it actually, you have to, if Blue Mesa is here, you've got, the main stem of the Gunnison goes up all the way up to Crested Butte and beyond. And it also goes up to Taylor Park, which is up above Gunnison on the east. You've got branches that go down come out of the Saguache, the Seboia River, and then the Lake Fork branch of the Gunnison that comes straight out of Lake City and comes out of Lake San Cristobal. So you've got to actually manage to prevent aquatic invasives from getting in all those headwaters. You have to have your eye on almost every boat that comes in to the Gunnison Basin in order to keep the invasives out of Blue Mesa. And you think you think, oh, well, what's the consequence of having zebra mussels or quagga mussels in Blue Mesa? It's bad, really bad. It will overturn the entire ecosystem of that reservoir. So it'll collapse all of the sport fishing, fisheries, the kokanee salmon that everybody comes in to fish for, the giant lake trout, the Mackinac trout, the trophy trout, the rainbows, the brown trout that are in the reservoir, because those mussels just pull all the phytoplankton out of the water column and sort of collapse the basis of the sport fishery that's there. It also would consign the entire downstream agricultural system to invasion by zebra mussels. So the people who clean out the canals for the Uncompahgre Water Users Association, all of a sudden that entire canal infrastructure will be filled with mussels. And the dam itself, there's pretty good data that it would completely changed the maintenance routine for the dam, and double or triple the amount of cost just to maintain the electrical and water retention functions of those dams. So it's a major and ongoing issue to keep the mussels out of the reservoir. So aquatic invasive species. We also have an ecology program here that studies rare plants. I actually brought there's a cool endemic species called this is called Black Canyon Gilia. It's a very specialized plant that hangs on the canyon walls and finds spots where there's just a little bit of moisture coming out, and occupies that habitat. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about endemic plants and animals, so I'm glad you brought an example.
Yeah. So this is Black Canyon Gilia. There are only a few populations in the whole of Colorado. It's one of the few really rare endemic plants that we have in the canyon, and the ecology program studies the rare plants. We also have an invasive plant species treatment crew. Actually, we have two of them, one at Curricani and one at Black Canyon. And they go around, they control invasives like dandelion, although dandelion's not the worst offender. There are other things they target, like cheatgrass and Russian thistle. Both of those are really pernicious weeds. And they also do ecological restoration. Like up here on the canyon rim, you'll see a lot of trampling around the overlooks and all. If you see those signs that say, give plants a break, and the little chains to keep people from walking all over the overlook, those the folks, the ecology crew, are the folks that do the revegetation work out there. And so part of the ecology crew is wilderness management. So we have about 15,000, maybe 50, I think it's either 15,000 or 15,900 acres of wilderness. That's essentially encompasses everything below the rim in Black Canyon, and then there's a backcountry area in the northwest part of the park that's also wilderness. And those areas are some of the coolest, because the principles of wilderness are like untrammeled. They're supposed to not have any sort of permanent people development at all. They're supposed to be essentially left alone to enjoy in unconfined recreation. So if you wanted to go out there and just sort of hike around in the pinyon juniper on the north rim in an unconfined way, that's what it's there for. You want to have a wilderness permit, but other than that, you just go out there and be by yourself. Yeah. And that's one of the principles also, is solitude. If you really want to go away and experience, being by yourself and thinking about things, that's kind of what the wilderness is for. So,
do you like to recreate in that way?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've done that sort of thing. So it's actually interesting, because I'm of two minds of it. Like, I like going out and being by myself, but I also like being in social context. So, I haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of that solitary sort of unconfined recreation since, having a family and being married, and it's you don't get as many opportunities to do that when you get a little bit older, have a lot of responsibility. So
you talked about the aquatic invasives of your area, and then we also talked about ecology and then the other programs.
So we also have a wildlife program, and that's run out of the office in Curricani at Elk Creek. And the folks there, we're doing a couple of different projects that I really like to highlight. One is we're working cooperatively with the Bureau of Land Management that manages the Gunnison Gorge rec area, or it's not really a rec area, conservation area just to our west. So they have a permit with us, and they're working also with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife to study, they call it RBS 81. It's Rocky Mountain Bighorn Sheep, herd number 81. And that's essentially the herd that stretches from kind of the lower end of the conservation area all the way pretty much to where we are. So it's about, I want to say it's maybe 20 miles of the Gunnison River and the canyon itself. And so they are studying herd numbers, distribution, sex distribution, like how many males and females, how many kids there are in the herd, what the recruitment is like, recruitment in a biological sense, like how many new kids are being born every year, and what's the sex distribution of them. They're also doing some genetics on it, although I don't think that's the main focus. And they're also looking at predation, like what's eating the Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep. And the great thing about that is that because the herd itself is protected in the park, it provides a really good base for increases in numbers. We can see this herd has the potential to really expand, which is cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
What a landscape for them.
Oh yeah. Well, this is perfect. This is the type of land. In fact, the funny thing is that it's probably a little too steep for them in a lot of places, but you'd be surprised. Like they can get up and down the canyon like you would not believe. Like they're regularly like going down to the river, out by Dragon Point and Painted Wall, beyond Painted Wall to Sunset View. That's kind of like seems to be where they really like to hang out. Well, they're dropping over the edge of the canyon and, bouldering down to the river and coming back up and hanging out on the rim. Like it's just natural for them. So. And
these are some of the steepest canyon walls in the entire country.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. At the narrowest point, the canyon's like a quarter of a mile, 1,400 feet wide, and it's easily 1,800 to 2,000 feet deep in a lot of places. So
you mentioned that genetics isn't necessarily the primary focus of that project, right. But would they be able to find if this specific herd of sheep has an adaptation that allows them to climb or descend, better or differently than sheep that are, not climbing as steep of cliffs or mountains?
I think that they could eventually identify that. But there's been the Rocky Mountain Bighorn, the management of that over the years has been very, it's been very active. Let me put it that way. There've been a lot of sheep that have been, moved to different places all over Colorado just to reestablish populations. I mean, the classic example, of course, is the Rocky Mountain sheep that they were, what were they? The Colorado Park Division of Wildlife, before it was Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they were actually trying to reintroduce bighorn sheep. I don't remember the exact mountain range where they were trying to reestablish them, but they ended up breaking down like right around Colorado Springs in that area that's Garden of the Gods. Mm-hmm. And they didn't know what to do. They were like, what do we do with these sheep? Our truck's not going anywhere. We've got all these sheep in the trailer. And so they just dropped the gate on the trailer and let the bighorn sheep out in Garden of the Gods. And that whole population that's survived and reproduced in Garden of the Gods is from some complete other place in Colorado, So the good thing about having the park here is that the herd that's actually centered in the conservation area in the park, if they get good recruitment and they grow, they can actually inhabit the entirety of of the Gunnison River in Black Canyon all the way up to Lake Fork, where there's another herd that goes up into the San Juan Mountains. And really what you're looking for as a biologist are herds that are self-sustaining, they're in the right habitat, and they have the opportunity to move geographically in the habitat that they are adapted for. So really what we're looking for with that particular species is a well-connected population that can move around, and I think we're starting to see that with that. The numbers on this particular herd are above 100 at this point, and it has a pretty decent sex distribution. They're about 45% male, 55% nannies and kids. So so wildlife. In addition to Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, we've got in the sagebrush steppe at Curricani, we've got the Gunnison sage grouse, which is Endangered Species Act listed species. It's listed as threatened. It's not endangered at this point, but that particular population is centered around what's essentially a high sagebrush island that encompasses the tributaries to the Gunnison above about 8,000 feet, but below about 10,000 feet. And that's largely areas that are kind of to the south of Blue Mesa Reservoir, to the east up the Tamichi drainage and up into the Sawatch Mountains, and then north of Gunnison there's a steppe, sagebrush mesa top steppe that sort of goes into the West Elk Mountains. So that whole area has become a sage island, and the sage grouse, the Gunnison sage grouse, are well adapted to that. But at this point, that has become an issue because a lot of the potential flow of that population into other areas that are suitable habitat, and those are largely, like, there's a small population over on the North Rim in Crawford. There's some smaller populations down in San Miguel County on the west side of the San Juans. Like the connection between the largest population of Gunnison sage grouse and these satellite populations has become more tenuous because there isn't continuous sagebrush between to link the population. The habitat has become disjointed.
And what exactly is a sage grouse?
What is a sage grouse? I didn't bring a photo of it, but so the female sage grouse is about maybe, 8 to 11, maybe 12 inches tall, and they're about 2 pounds, maybe 2.5 pounds. And the male sage grouses are a little larger. They're about maybe 13 inches tall. And what they're known for is their dancing behavior in the spring. Like they gather together, the males all gather together, and the females come into an area called a lek. It's L-E-K-S. They're called leks. And essentially it's an area that they go to year after year. Sometimes it might be on a small rise in the sagebrush, but it's typically an area that's kind of devoid of sage. Like, so you don't see large sticky uppy plants. It's all fairly low grass, and the males all gather around, and they display and they sound. Like, and it's really cool when you go out there because they display very early in the morning. Usually it's between, in the spring it's between 4 and 8 o'clock a.m. So the sun's not even up when they're starting, and then pretty soon after the sun rises, they all disperse into the sage, so that all the displaying ends. But they make a cool sound. It's like they make a like a whooping sound. It sounds like a big bubble bursting, like it goes whoop, 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 whoop. But they have air sacs in their neck, and they put those air sacs, fill them up, and they go whoop, 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 like that. So it sounds like a giant bubble bursting almost, which is really cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And there can be anywhere between, 10 or 30 or 40 males displaying on a single lek, which is really exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
There's so much happening in these wild and natural places that we don't even know about that
Yep.
is so unique. I love the concept of animals having secret lives and
Oh, yeah.
and doing amazing things out in this wilderness. And, one of the things that I heard recently from a land manager that I really like and would like to hear your thoughts on is, we don't need to know everything about animals. We just need to know enough on how to protect them in the landscape that you're managing for. And so with all those teams that you had just mentioned that you report to you information, what information are you currently utilizing and what's your current focus on protecting specific resources in this park?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is keeping, it's a pretty well-known ecological principle that if you can keep a habitat in good condition, you can keep the species that depend on that habitat in good condition. So the idea of that is, if we have kind of a mixed pinyon juniper forest up here on the rim, along with the gamble oak, with bunch grasses and mountain mahogany as kind of another species in that mix. If we can keep all the vegetation in good condition and with good diversity, the animal population that depends on it will also remain in good condition. So essentially that means that you need to do targeted monitoring, like land health monitoring. You have to do vegetation surveys, and you also have to do some of the animal surveys as well, just to be sure things are going okay, especially with the charismatic fauna. People are very interested in that, so you have to stay on top of it. And just to give you an example of what that means as a practical matter, like last year, we had a good mast crop in the gamble oak. We had lots of acorns. Well, that made it super desirable for bears. So we actually saw, at one point there were black bears that were climbing in the gamble oak, like within view of the fee booth, like the fee collectors at the front gate of the park were watching black bears climb in these gamble oaks and eat acorns out of the oak tree. Which is like fantastic. That's like, as a manager, that's the thing you want to see. You want that bear to be eating what it's supposed to be eating, which is acorns in the right season, not interacting with people, not like relying on trash that's coming from the campground or some other human source of food. You want them to be the bears, the best bears that they can be in the ecosystem where they belong. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
how proud does that make you feel as a land manager?
Oh, it makes me feel good. I mean, there are a lot of other things that like we don't really have, we're not on top of, like we have a lot of restoration work to do here. Like I said, we don't use fire as much as we probably should. And we probably don't know enough about the fire regime up here on the rim or in some of the other habitats that we really need to know in order to get that fire component of ecosystem management back into balance. But it is really gratifying to be able to not have people dependent animals. People not have animals dependent on people for provisioning. It's not great that they're habituated to people. Like they come in and they're not scared of people, but it also is good to see that they're not depending on people for handouts or not being fed or anything like that. They're in this ecosystem doing their thing, which is great.
As we begin to start to wrap this podcast up, one question I have that I'm very curious about: Black Canyon of the Gunnison. The black part of the name comes from areas of this canyon only getting very minimal amounts of sunlight.
Right.
So those little pockets of the canyon that get 30 minutes of sunlight per day, does that invite endemic plants or different species? Is that an inviting area for them, or are those kind of dead pockets within the canyon?
Oh, no. One of the great things about ecosystems is that the more physiographic variety you get, and when I say that, I mean like the geology of it. Like here you have you have a whole range of different types of granites and schists and pegmatites, and I've got a whole. We just had a geology talk by Lon Abbott from the University of Colorado. He brought out sections of the geologic map, and you can see from this, like they've got everything from Black Canyon granite kind of in the main portion, and these are all intrusive dikes into the geology, the basement geology, all these red lines. And then you've even got Quaternary, which is like less than Cretaceous. Well, Quaternary is the most recent age geologically, and these are actually pockets of river gravels and sands that were left on the top of the canyon by rivers at some point. It might have been as recently as a couple million years ago. So, this provides you kind of like the details of the physiography. So you mix this physiography with like the other factors of amount of rainfall, amount of light, and what it does is it provides not something that you should really conceive of as being barren versus lush. It creates the variety of habitats necessary to support a really rich variety of plants and animals. That's really the story, and each one can get to be specially adapted to the area where they are, whether it's got a ton of light, is much drier, or is wet and might be in a seep on the canyon wall. So it's the variety that's really important.
That's fascinating.
Anyway.
That's really cool. You were actually talking before we turned on the camera about that class and how I guess mesmerized you were by how much you enjoyed that class, and you had said you thought you had learned something that you thought was really cool in comparison to the Grand Canyon. What was mentioning?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. Lon Abbott started out in Arizona, and so he was he's been a professor, I think, at Colorado now for maybe 18 or 19 years. But he started out down there, and of course we're on kind of the northern end of the Colorado Plateau. Like if you go like Grand Mesa and Book Cliffs and stuff, that's kind of like the northern edge, very northern edge of the Colorado Plateau. But if you look at Black Canyon, and you can kind of see this great unconformity here, essentially what you're looking at is the same formation. As you go down into Black Canyon, you're looking at the same formation that's in Grand Canyon below around Plateau Point. From Plateau Point down to the river is kind of what's right here. So it was like, dang, that is like super cool. Like, how are we all connected? That's how we're connected. The basement rock of this canyon is kind of the same basement rock that's at the Grand Canyon.
That's amazing.
So,
and how about with the geology, I guess, in the hydrology of the river. Doesn't the river here descend
Oh yeah,
six times steeper than what it descends at the Grand Canyon?
I don't know that it descends that. I don't know that it descends that much. The real interesting thing about Black Canyon is the speed of formation. Like I think I talked about 2 million years to do that, and the processes are the same. The one thing that's very different is the size of the river moving, especially bottom load on the river. Like in Grand Canyon, you're talking anywhere between 6,000 and it might be 60,000 cubic feet per second of water going down that canyon. That's enough water to do amazing amounts of erosion. The volumes here, pre-dam, were probably anywhere between 400 or 500 CFS and maybe as much as 70 or 80,000 CFS. This is not to knock the Gunnison, but it's a headwater. It's not the same. But the important thing there is that the geology of the canyon is resistant enough, and the side amount of water coming in from the side canyons is small enough that the main stem of the Gunnison has been able to concentrate on driving all that bed load, all that sediment, all that water downstream in a very narrow corridor. So that's how come you get this canyon that Grand Canyon's like this. It opens up and is grand, of course. Mm-hmm. Here, the rock is giving it all it's got, and making that river cut down in a super narrow track, and that's what you see as a result. You see a canyon here that is amazingly. You go up to the edge and you're like, that's a long way down, straight down. It just makes it dramatic, but in a different way.
Yeah, it is. When I first walked up to the edge, I was taken aback. It's a pretty special experience, experiencing this park and seeing it for the first time. Uh-huh. One final question on the geology side. The faces are a little bit different, and that's because of the process of frost wedging and sunlight here in this park. Yeah. So what has frost wedging done to these canyon walls in comparison from the north side or the south side?
Well, and on the north side, it gets more sunlight earlier in the season. So I think that the typical thing that happens in that situation is the north facing slopes of the canyon going in lose their snow and retain more moisture than the south facing slopes. So you will tend to see a higher degree of wedging on your north facing slopes because number one, there's more water retained in the rock and in the soil. And number two, the ice stays in the soil when the ground freezes and the rock freezes for longer. So it allows the process of wedging to occur more deeply and longer. So you'll see more and deeper routes into the main part of the canyon on the south side than on the north side in general.
It's a fascinating place, and I'm glad we talked about the resources here, because when you come to a place like Black Canyon, like I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's easy to get lost in the geology, but there's a huge story here occurring on the wildlife side, on the vegetation side, and of course, in every park on the human history side. Yeah. As we wrap this up, I do want to give you the floor to encourage people to come out here to visit this beautiful park, why it's special, and why people should make it part of their tour here when they come to Colorado.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, people from the valley, from the Uncompahgre Valley, very early on recognized it. I mean, the European folks who moved here were so impressed with it. that they organized as a community to set this up as a national monument. They essentially lobbied for it. They were like, this is a fantastic canyon, you know, it's the steepest, deepest canyon in Colorado, maybe even the United States. You know, they championed the preservation part of it, you know, and the access part of it. And you know, that's not what makes it unique. The geology actually makes it unique, but the prolonged interest in preserving it as a place that you could come and visit and get inspiration from is really the story, you know. It's the human side of the story. And you know, we haven't even really talked about the recreation side of things, where this is kind of like this is one of the pinnacles of traditional climbing in the world, is to come to the Black Canyon and climb some of the traditional routes up the canyon walls both on the south rim, but more on the north rim, off of the north rim, I should say, the canyon walls that are south facing. You know, that makes it super special for a huge population of people who really enjoy rock climbing as a sport and as a kind of like I don't know, a way of being. You know, they feel a sense of freedom and communion with nature through that type of activity. So, and it's really good to see that, you know. I also, if you haven't seen the North Rim, you should go see the North Rim.
Oh, I'm definitely making it part of my tour. Yeah. I'm going to try and get down to, well, I'm definitely going to go down to the East Portal Road and see the bottom of the canyon as well. Yeah, it seems like an amazing place to recreate. Are there kayakers down on the Gunnison River as well?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's funny that you asked that, because I came from Shenandoah, and there are lots of people who kayak on the Shenandoah and the Potomac. And I was always like, man, wouldn't it be really cool? Can I like kayak down through the canyon? And people were like, you are a nut, like, because there are a few people in the world that will do it, but you have to be like a world-class kayaker, and you have to be willing to portage around some of the falls and the hydros that are in the bottom of the canyon, because they will kill you. Like, they are dangerous, really dangerous. So not many people kayak in the bottom, kayak the Gunnison through Black Canyon, but you know, it's a heck of a commitment.
Well, I can certainly appreciate that. The power of Mother Nature and
oh yeah,
the natural forces at work are always amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you decided to combine your passions as a kid, as a diver and an archaeologist, and that led you to a place like Black Canyon, where you can protect the resources here and obviously give visitors access to such an amazing place. So thank you for everything you've done in your journey with the NPS, and thank you for sitting with me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming out, and you know, it's good to see people interested in parks, you know, because you know, we really the part of the preservation part really depends on the commitment of the people of this country to preserving places. I mean, we should really be preserving everything. It's like we have one earth to live on at this point, and you know, we really need to take care of it. But when it comes to parks, it's really the commitment of the American people that make our job possible. And you know, we really, I appreciate that you want to get that message out, because I think you know, it needs to get out. You know, I'm committed to the Park Service mission, and You know, it really is like protecting the resources and providing the highest quality resources that we can provide to anybody that wants to come out and visit, you know.
Well, America loves its national parks, and there's a reason why it's America's best idea. So thank you for saying that, and thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, you bet. No problem.
Thanks for checking out this edition of the Safe Travels podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. Brinnen is a fascinating park ranger who has so much knowledge about the cultural and natural resources of this area. So if you like this type of content, it would mean a whole lot to me if you liked, commented, and subscribed. And until next time, safe travels.